Have you ever hiked so deep into the wilderness that you felt like the trees were watching you? That the forest itself wanted you gone? I thought I was just going on a weekend escape. What I didn't know was that the mountain had other plans. It was late September, the air crisp with that kind of clean cold that stings your lungs but wakes you up. I had planned a solo hiking trip to the Smoky Mountains, something I had been putting off for years. My friends kept telling me I was crazy for going alone. But I wanted peace, away from my phone, emails, and the constant noise of the city. Just me, the trail, and the silence. The ranger at the station gave me a strange look when I checked in. He leaned over the counter, lowering his voice as if he didn't want others to hear. "You sticking to the main trails, right?" he asked. "Yeah," I said casually. "Just the loop around Ridge Point." He stared at me for a moment too long, then nodded. "Good. Don't wander off. People do that sometimes, and they don't always come back." I laughed nervously, assuming he was just trying to spook me. But the way his eyes lingered made me uneasy. The first day went smooth. The sun broke through the trees, painting the forest floor gold. The crunch of leaves under my boots was the only sound besides the distant rush of a stream. I felt free, alive. By late afternoon, I reached a small clearing where I set up camp. As I ate, I noticed something odd. The forest was too quiet. No birds. No rustling. Just heavy silence pressing against my ears. I told myself it was normal. Maybe animals just went deeper into the woods at night. Still, when I crawled into my tent, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was standing just outside the thin layer of nylon listening. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to a faint sound. At first, I thought it was wind moving through the trees, but then I realized it was footsteps. Slow, deliberate, circling my tent. My heart pounded as I held my breath. The steps crunched the leaves, stopped, then started again, moving closer. I wanted to shout, to ask who was out there, but fear locked my throat. The steps paused right by my head, then faded back into the forest. I didn't sleep after that. Morning light finally came, and I convinced myself it must have been an animal. Maybe a deer. Maybe my imagination. I packed up quickly, eager to finish the loop and head back. But when I got to the trail, something was wrong. The markers I had followed the day before were gone. The carved blazes on the trees, the colored ribbons, everything had vanished as if someone had scrubbed the forest clean. I walked for hours, certain I'd find the main path, but the woods just twisted and repeated itself. Every ridge looked the same, every cluster of rocks and trees a mirror of the last. Panic started to creep in. I tried retracing my steps, but the deeper I went, the stranger the forest became. At one point, I stumbled into a clearing I swore I had just left half an hour earlier. My own boot prints circled back at me. By evening, my water was low, and the silence of the forest grew heavier. Then I saw it. Ahead, through the trees, was another hiker. Relief flooded me. He stood still, facing away, wearing an old green jacket and carrying a large pack. "Hey!" I called out, rushing forward. Thank God I've been lost. But he didn't turn. He didn't move at all. Just stood there, motionless. "Hello," I said again, slowing my pace. That's when I noticed his legs. They weren't resting on the ground like mine. His boots hovered an inch above the earth. A sick feeling hit my stomach. I froze. The man, or whatever it was, slowly began to turn its head, unnaturally slow, until I saw its face. But it wasn't a face at all. Just a hollow blackness, like the inside of a cave. No eyes, no mouth. I stumbled back, tripping over roots, my chest tightening with terror. The figure raised one arm and pointed into the woods. My body shook, but some force compelled me to look. Where he pointed, the trees bent toward one another, forming a kind of dark archway. I didn't want to go. Every part of me screamed to run the other way. But my legs moved on their own, carrying me closer. The air grew colder, the forest darker, until I stepped beneath the arch. Suddenly, I was back on the trail. Just like that. The markers reappeared, the forest returned to normal. I spun around, the archway was gone. No figure. Just trees swaying in the breeze. I didn't waste a second. I ran. I don't even remember breathing until I saw the ranger station again. The ranger was outside, leaning against the railing. He looked at me, pale and shaking, and just nodded slowly. "You saw him, didn't you?" he said quietly. I stared at him, speechless. "People think the forest just swallows folks up," he continued. "But it's him. The hollow hiker. Shows up when you step too far off the path. Sometimes he leads you back. Sometimes he doesn't." I wanted answers, but all I could do was get in my car and drive, my hands trembling the whole way. I never went hiking alone again. And even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see that faceless shadow in the woods, waiting for the next lost soul to stumble across his trail. There are trails that hikers avoid. Not because they're closed or dangerous, but because of the stories. And when I decided to explore one of those trails, I learned the hard way that some legends aren't just campfire tales. It was 2 summers ago and my cousin Luke had come to visit. He was the adventurous type, always chasing something thrilling. We'd both grown up in a small town in Colorado where hiking trails were practically our backyard. But there was one we had never dared to hike, Devil's Hollow. The locals said hikers vanished there. Some claimed they'd heard screams echoing from the canyon at night, even when no one was around. Of course, Luke laughed it off. "Perfect place for us to camp," he said with a grin. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We set out in the late afternoon, following the narrow trail into the hollow. The trees grew dense, their branches knitting together so tightly that the sunlight dimmed to a dusky glow. After about 2 hours, the path dipped sharply, leading us into a rocky basin where the air felt unnaturally heavy, like breathing through wet cloth. We pitched our tent by a dried creek bed and built a small fire. As darkness crept in, the forest grew silent, eerily so. Not a cricket, not a bird. Just our fire crackling in the suffocating quiet. "Kinda spooky, huh?" I said, half joking. Luke smirked. "You buying into those dumb stories already?" But later, as we sat in the stillness, a sound broke through. At first it was faint, like wind moving across the rocks. Then it grew clearer. A scream. A woman's scream, raw and desperate, echoing through the hollow. Luke and I locked eyes. My skin prickled. "Tell me you heard that," I whispered. "Probably just some hiker messing around," he said, though his voice lacked confidence. The scream came again, this time closer. It rose into the night, then cut off suddenly, leaving the silence heavier than before. My stomach twisted. Something about the sound was wrong, too real, too full of pain. Against every instinct screaming at me to stay put, Luke grabbed a flashlight. "We should check it out." "Are you insane?" I hissed. "That's exactly how people disappear out here." But he was already moving, the beam of his flashlight slicing through the trees. Reluctantly, I followed. We climbed over rocks and wove through thick brush, the scream guiding us deeper. My nerves buzzed with fear, but Luke pressed on. Finally, we reached a narrow clearing where the ground dipped into a ravine. And that's when we saw her. A woman stood at the bottom, barefoot, her long hair tangled, her clothes ripped and dirty. She stared up at us with wide, wild eyes. "Help me," she cried, her voice cracking. "Please help me." Without hesitation, Luke scrambled down toward her. But something in me froze. The way she moved, it was off. Jerky, unnatural, like she wasn't used to her own body. My instincts screamed at me to stop him, but before I could, he was at her side. "Are you okay?" "What happened?" he asked. The woman looked at him, then at me, and suddenly her face twisted. Her mouth opened wider than humanly possible, stretching into a gaping void. The scream that tore out of her shook the ground itself. Luke collapsed to his knees, clutching his ears. I stumbled back, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. The sound wasn't just loud, it was inside my head, rattling my skull, flooding me with terror. I don't know how, but I managed to grab Luke's arm and drag him back up the ravine. The woman, or whatever she was, started climbing after us, her limbs bending at unnatural angles as she shrieked again. We ran blindly through the forest, branches slashing our faces, until we saw the faint glow of our campfire. But when we stumbled into the clearing, the fire was gone. Our tent, gone. It was as if we had never set up camp at all. Panic surged through me. "This isn't right, Luke. This isn't real." He looked around, pale and shaking. I don't understand." Then from the darkness the scream came again. But this time it wasn't just one voice. It was dozens. Hundreds. Men, women, children, all screaming at once, surrounding us. The forest seemed to close in, shadows pressing from every direction. I couldn't see them, but I felt them, circling just beyond the reach of our flashlight. "Run," I whispered. And we did. I don't remember how long we ran. Minutes? Hours? Time warped into a blur of terror. Finally, through the trees I saw headlights, an old pickup bouncing along a dirt road. We burst onto the path, waving frantically. The truck skidded to a stop and the driver, a weathered man in his 60s, yanked us inside. "You fools," he muttered as he sped away. "You went into Devil's Hollow, didn't you?" We didn't answer. We couldn't. We just sat there, shaking as the screams faded into the distance. The man dropped us near the ranger station and warned us never to return. "Those aren't screams you're hearing," he said. "They're echoes. Voices of the lost. That hollow keeps what it takes. You're lucky to be alive." To this day, Luke and I never speak of that night. But sometimes when I'm alone, I hear it again. That scream. Piercing, endless. And I wonder, did we really escape, or are we still trapped in Devil's Hollow, running forever from the voices of the damned? I used to love hiking alone. Something about the quiet, the freedom, the escape from people. It always felt like therapy. But after one trip to the Rockies, I learned that being alone in the wilderness doesn't mean you're truly alone. It started on a long weekend in July. I had taken 3 days off work and planned to hike a backcountry trail that wasn't too well known. The ranger warned me that the trail had been closed the previous season due to landslides, but it had recently reopened. That only made me more excited. Less foot traffic meant more solitude. The first day was perfect. Blue skies, warm breeze, the smell of pine all around me. I hiked nearly 15 miles before setting up camp in a small clearing. As I cooked dinner, I noticed another campsite across the valley. A small fire flickered through the trees, and I could just barely make out the silhouette of a tent. It was odd because I hadn't seen another hiker all day. Still, it comforted me knowing someone else was out there. I wasn't completely alone. That night I slept well. But around 3 a.m. I woke to the sound of footsteps. Crunching leaves, slow and steady, moving around my tent. My pulse spiked instantly. I froze, listening. The steps circled me once, twice, then stopped right by the entrance. I held my breath, gripping my knife. Minutes passed. Finally, I heard the steps move away. I didn't sleep again. In the morning, I checked the ground. No prints. Nothing disturbed. It made no sense. Maybe I had dreamed it? Still, I packed up quickly, eager to put some distance between myself and that clearing. By mid-afternoon, after hours of hiking, I found another good spot to camp. Exhausted, I sat on a log, sipping water, then froze. Across the valley, through a gap in the trees, I saw it again. The same small fire. The same tent. My stomach dropped. There was no way. I had hiked all day in the opposite direction. That camp shouldn't have been anywhere near me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just another hiker with the same kind of gear. Maybe the angle made it look familiar. But deep down, I knew. It was the same camp. That night I barely ate. My nerves were shot. I sat in the dark, listening, waiting. And sure enough, just past midnight, the footsteps returned. Slow. Measured. Circling. I called out this time, my voice cracking. "Who's out there?" Silence. Then, in a whisper so soft I thought I imagined it, came the words, "It's my turn." My blood ran cold. I bolted out of the tent, flashlight shaking in my hands. The beam cut through the trees, but no one was there. Only silence. I didn't sleep at all. At first light, I packed up and practically ran down the trail. My only goal was to reach the ranger station. But as the sun dipped low that evening, I realized I wasn't going to make it out in one day. I had to camp again. My body ached, my legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to keep moving. And then I saw it. Smoke rising through the trees. A fire. A tent. The same campsite. This time it was closer. I don't know what came over me, fear, anger, desperation, but I stormed toward it. Branches whipped my arms, roots caught my boots, but I pushed through until I burst into the clearing. Empty. No tent. No fire. Nothing but dirt and rocks. I stood there, panting, feeling the weight of the forest pressing down. And then, behind me, a voice whispered again. "It's your turn." I spun, flashlight trembling. For a split second I saw someone standing there. A shadow, tall and still, with a face that looked exactly like mine. The light flickered. And he was gone. I don't remember much after that. Just running, branches tearing at my clothes, my lungs burning. Somehow I stumbled onto the road near the trailhead. A passing car found me and drove me to town. When I told the rangers, they exchanged uneasy glances. One of them finally said, "You're not the first. Some hikers swear there's a phantom campsite out there. Shows up at night. Always just across the valley. And those who see it more than once, they say it's an invitation." I asked what that meant, but they didn't answer. It's been 2 years since then. I haven't hiked again. I don't even like walking near the woods. Because sometimes, late at night, when I look out my window, I see it. A faint glow. A campfire. Waiting for me to take my turn.